start like this. DJ Orid. Who knows the song?
Started from the bottom, now we're here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team fucking here. Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Thanks, Sean. You thought you were here for an investment summit. This is Club Money on a Tuesday morning. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure today to be your program director. Welcome to the Business Day Financial Mail Investment Summit, and it's brought to you by Sandton. Thank you very much for being with us. We have many guests with us today, important people this morning, including the Finance Minister. Anyone heard of him? Pravin Gordhan. All protocol is observed. So we have a complex and rich program this morning. So what I want to do is really move through the proceedings quite briskly. But we do want to let the world know what we are talking about. In the world, how many Twitter users? 320 million Twitter users globally, and in our corner of Africa, South Africa, 7.8 million. So the hashtag is hashtag BDFM Invest _Summit, and at Invest Summit is the handle. So I do invite you to pay attention, to make notes this morning, and to interrogate our speakers. But perhaps the biggest ask that I will do of you this morning is to have fun. Do you think you could do that? Do investment bankers, corporate people, the clever people, do they know how to have fun? Try being me. Do you know how to have fun? Okay, hopefully things will improve as we proceed this morning. So I just want to say this in setting the landscape. This particular summit comes at a time in South Africa's economic landscape where there is a myriad of factors at play, including what I like to call the top 6. Possible handcuffs and downgrades, protest and finger-pointing, unemployment and uncertainty. But the bold know that great challenges present great opportunities. And here's what Robert Greene wrote in the 48 Laws of Power. He said, if you're unsure of a course of action, do not attempt it. Your doubts and hesitations will infect your execution. Timidity in an economy like ours is dangerous. Enter with boldness. Any mistakes you commit through audacity are easily corrected with even more audacity. Everyone admires the bold, and no one admires the timid. So we can interrogate that statement, but what's certain is that we do need a bold new course in South Africa's economy, and that is effectively what we're going to explore this morning. Greene also wrote, keep your friends for friendship, but work with the skilled and the competent. I've worked with both of our first guests before, Business Day editor Tim Cohen and Financial Mail editor Rob Rose, and I will say that I think the pair of you meet that criteria, sort of. And I'm also proud to call you my friends. So join me in welcoming them, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi everyone, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this Financial Mail Business Day Investment Summit. We are the Laurel and Hardy, or Hardy and Laurel of the Financial Mail.
The bold and the beautiful, according to Iman's.
Oh really? We thought we should just jump up quickly and say hello and tell a joke. So this is my joke. And this is actually true. It's a true story. My investment advisor, who's in fact not from Sasfin, sorry Sasfin, he once a quarter he has his compliance officer comes around and they sit and have tea and they discuss their problem clients, me being one of them, and the investment officer, the compliance officer always brings his own rusks for some reason or other, and in the latest time that they were sitting and having tea, he opened the box, there was only one rusk. So my investment manager said, you know, for somebody who's so careful about investment, that's very bad rusk management. Okay, so now you tell a better joke than that.
Oh, well, that's a lot of pressure, considering I didn't come with any jokes. I mean, I suppose I could start by saying Mosebenzi Zwane, but that's a very short joke. But I just want to say thank you very much to everyone for coming today, or in the parlance of our day, agreeing to be captured for the day. The Financial Mail is really proud to do this again. We did it about 20 years ago, but between the 1970s and early 1990s. And it was a pretty big thing. It was at the Carlton Centre when that was a thing. It was a 2-day event. We had the top speakers, and we're hoping that this is the dawn of a new era of people getting together to discuss the economic zeitgeist of the time. And I suppose it's fitting that our main speaker, our first speaker, is a man who the last time we held this conference was hauled up in Kempton Park at CODESA, drawing up the blueprint for our democracy that would govern us for the next couple of decades. And here we sit 2 decades later, and the circle has turned, and this is the man who's defending our democracy against the forces, I would say, of, I suppose, tongue-in-cheek economic illiteracy, and basically keeping things on an evil keel, despite, a bogus criminal investigation and the fact that, his colleagues like Zwane clearly didn't get the memo setting out their responsibilities and that they don't actually have oversight of the banks. So I want to thank you very much for coming today. I think Andrew Cantor, 2 weeks ago, took a very brave decision to stop lending to state-owned companies unless there's greater transparency. The fact that, the economic zeitgeist of the time. Sorry to use a terrible terminology twice. But anyway, welcome and thank you very much for coming.
And I just wanted to say, add my thanks to the Finance Minister for arriving. Really honoured to have him here today. But really, I think we do stand at an extraordinary moment in South African history, and this conference really has. We really must take the opportunity to relook at where we stand. The world is at a precarious point. South Africa is at a precarious point, but the stock market's flying. So, and I think that illustrates something. One of the kind of truisms about South African society is that we really have a fantastic investment environment in South Africa, and we hope that this conference reflects that and improves that and deepens that. I just want to say some other thank yous, if you don't mind. The organizers of this conference come from TMG's newly established events management group, and they've really done a fantastic job. We started on this idea about 6 months ago, and they've really really pulled out all the stops to bring this conference to you. And we are going to do it every year, and we hope to improve it and bring it back to the level that it was when back in the 70s. But we won't have it in the Carlton, so it'll be here from now on, I'm afraid. But just to say thanks very much to Stephen Horowski, who's the commercial head of the unit, Melissa de Alaguera, and Claire Schimpeter. I think I pronounced everybody's names wrong. I'm terribly sorry, guys. But anyway, thanks a lot, and really do enjoy the conference.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Rob. I don't know. In lieu of Rob's inability to tell a joke, I'm going to try. So a guy walks into the bank, and he speaks to the bank manager and says, how do I start a small business? So the bank manager thinks about it, and he answers and says, well, start a big one and wait 6 months. Wow, I could do this as a living, I think. Our next speaker, of course, might want to have a word with Tim Cohen, because he's from Sandton. But Sandton Wealth has been providing tailored private wealth management solutions since the 1890s, by the way. And since his appointment, assets under management and advisement have grown from 70 billion rand to 110 billion rand. So please join me in welcoming Michael Sandton, head of Sandton Wealth and CEO of Sandton Securities.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Tim, if you are looking for a house which is expert in risk management, please see me afterwards. Earlier this year, I was summoned to an interministerial committee in the hope that I would meet Finance Minister Gordhan, but unfortunately he was one of the ministers not there after Sandton had terminated its relationship with Oak Bay. But I'm glad that we'll be meeting him today. and we are very fortunate that he'll be speaking to all of us today. So thank you, Finance Minister, for coming. We would also like to thank Times Media, Business Day, and Financial Mail for the work that they've done and the team involved in that. Taryn Wisopi, Stefan Orshowski, Melissa de Argela, for the efforts that they've put into making this event happen. Investors are facing a myriad of issues which will impact how they position their portfolios to manage risk and optimize returns. Investment businesses will need to navigate these complexities that arise from these issues to assist their clients in achieving these goals. These issues relate both to how portfolios are positioned in an era of macroeconomic and political uncertainty locally and abroad. The next few months are going to be very interesting here and overseas, as well as to how investment managers operate in the face of a changing industry. I think it's therefore a very opportune time for us to be getting together with over a few hundred investment professionals here to debate some of the key issues when considering how best we manage client money. We at Sasfin Wealth are honored to be the headline sponsor, and we'd like to thank our fellow sponsors, many of whom we deal with in other parts of our business, as well as the Business Day, the Financial Mail, and all the associated individuals for their tireless efforts in making this event happen. Thank you very much. Enjoy the day.
If money talks, what would it say about your bank? Would it say that your bank is something to bank on and give credit to, and that they show you the right kind of interest? Would it say they make your bottom line look big and continually grow your best assets? Or would it say bank is a four-letter word? That your bank minds their own business more than yours, and you're at a loss as to how you can profit with them? Go beyond the red tape, beyond the bean counting, go beyond to where partnership is giving you true equity. Go beyond the bank, from business to banking to wealth management. Beyond the bank, where money really does talk your language. Sasfin. Beyond the bank.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that. And I'm sure that Tim Cohen can pencil you in at some point in the week. Up next, I really want to welcome a dear colleague and a friend of mine, Ray Hartley, who is the executive editor of Business Life. Ray, good morning, welcome. Do you want me to lead you up? We can.
Hi, yes. Morning, everybody. I'm going to be very quick. The Finance Minister will be with you right after this short commercial break. I just want to introduce you quickly to Business Live. It's a brand new website. We've been developing it in secret in tunnels in the Drakensberg over the last 6 months, and it's about to come out to see the light of day. And it basically is a site that answers the navigation question. I think in this day and age, there's a torrent of information coming at us, and the real intelligence is navigation, is knowing how to see your way through this torrent of information and get access to the reliable, credible information that you need. So Business Live, it's the best of Times Media's business content, and it will operate 24/7. It's got a team of fast news operators who will bring you the news as it happens, dedicated to the web. It uses the large newsrooms that we have at Business Day, the Financial Mail, and the Business Times. And it essentially becomes your one destination for business news. Those are the brands. I think we're all very familiar with them. And it's been a real privilege and an honor to work with these brands in the recent past. I've got to tell you, there's a level of professionalism and attention to detail and accuracy that is very impressive. So yes, we'll have a subscription model. You'll get them with your Business Live subscription, you will get full access to the Wall Street Journal, the entire Wall Street Journal site, which is paywalled and costs several million US dollars to subscribe to. You'll get it really at a rand cost. We have Morningstar, which supplies a lot of market information. And what's fantastic about this tool is that you can dig down into a company on your mobile, iPad, wherever you are. There's a lot of tear sheets that come up that give you all the detail on businesses. And then our partnership with the Financial Times. We have an exclusive Southern Africa partnership with the Financial Times, and we will bring you a selection of their best copy. So the idea is to be the place for business on the internet. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with all of that. The website is in a beta phase, so expect to see some gremlins, glitches, etc., until it launches on the 1st of October. Yeah, let's see if we can move this up, because I know you really want the finance minister. There's a story about the finance minister, yeah. So yeah, it's visually, it's very modern, it's quick, and it's responsive. So it fits onto all the devices automatically. It looks really good on a mobile phone. And all of the modcons of the internet are there, videos and embeds and so on. And yeah, I'm not going to take you through drop-down navigation menus. We will have a very, very powerful opinion section. So all of the columnists that write in Business Day, the Financial Mail, the Business Times, and the Rand Daily Mail will be on this platform. And this is stuff that I think you'll be really interested in. We worked very hard to make a quick and easy to read access to market information as it happens. The business tools and the share search are there, and that gives you your detailed information that I was talking about, your drill down into companies, all provided by Morningstar, very top level, good information. And there we go. Those are some of the categories that you will have access to. And then there's the premium section of the website. This is the part that you would subscribe to get the Wall Street Journal content, the FT content, and access to the top opinion writers in the group. And we have video, of course, because BDTV is going to be a platform, will be present on the site and will be broadcast from there. So there we go. That's as quick as I could possibly do it without breaking the clicker. Thank you very much for the time. Remember, businesslive.co.za. If you want to have a look at it now, just put a beta in front of that, beta.businesslive.co.za, and you can start having a look at it. And if you see any glitches, just drop me an email. Thank you very much.
He's back in that role again to steer the country through the shark-infested waters of ratings risks and managing what is a precarious time for this economy. He's also been dealing with a well-documented standoff with the Hawks. Anyone heard of them? Minister Gordhan was born in Durban, and that's where I'm from. And he will know what I'm talking about when I invoke my home, my hometown, my neighborhood, Unit 13 in Phoenix. Minister, you've heard of Unit 13 in Phoenix? That given the developments with the Hawks and the minister's response to it, in my neck of the woods, he's now known as Mr. Pravin, come and get me Gordhan. Ladies and gentlemen, the Minister of Finance to deliver the opening address. I did.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. Phoenix, by the way, was the township where in 1976-77, as young 24, 25-year-old activists, we began to cut our teeth in political activism and mass mobilization, as we later got to know what we were actually doing. And it was a fascinating breeding ground, so to speak, of ANC activists and UDF activists during that time. But Iman, I'm sure at that point in time, I wanted to ask how old you were. All right, let me just say 4 or 5 things, and I'm not sure whether we have Q&A or not, but much of it, I'm sure you will know. The first is, we've just come back from a G20 meeting at a summit level or leadership level. And it was a fascinating meeting for a couple of reasons. And in a sense, that gives you the backdrop of where South Africa stands in a global kind of context. The first of the observations that the G20 leaders made is that we are not in the worst shape possible as the globe, but increasingly there are risks that seem to continue to make their presence felt in the form of low growth, low investment, low trade, low confidence in certain parts of the world, and lots of cash moving around the world, but not being invested in any productive kind of way. The second observation was that, you must forgive me for coughing, please, that a new, if you like, set of drivers for growth need to be found. And the Chinese in particular, who are chairing the G20, have emerged with the idea of innovation-led development and growth. And I think it's an interesting concept that has relevance for our own situation, but for people like yourselves as well. When you make decisions about investment, how many of those decisions are about now and today? And how many of those decisions are about the medium term and how we are contributing towards the creation of or increase in potential growth in an economy? Because that's the challenge that many countries are facing at the end of the day, that today's challenges and response to those challenges can mean and does mean in many instances a decline in potential growth in a country. So the third element, which is linked to the second, is innovation. How do we do things differently? How do you compete on a global stage? What are the kinds of industries and sectors that would actually take us into a different era of growth? The fourth issue that emerges is growth in itself is no longer the panacea. That citizens throughout the world, and you're going to hear me giving this message many, many times in many different fora, but citizens are becoming impatient with elites, which includes all of us, by the way. Normally, you guys would say the politicians are the guys. So I'm going to stand here and say you are also part of the elite. And that impatience is about saying that GDP numbers are in themselves not a reflection of how the benefits of GDP or growth distributed in a society, particularly amongst, in our case, 55 million citizens. The fifth point that emerged is that the normal distributive mechanism, i.e. the tax system, where progressive tax systems based on higher levels of income, higher levels of taxation. But sometimes we forget higher levels of income also means better access to tax planners, as you know, and better access to tax havens, which still exist, Panama notwithstanding. And yeah, at least I can see some smiles, so that's good. So the world is being asked to actually look at the issue of distribution, of the benefits of growth. And a number of leaders, including the formal communique itself, made that point as well. So we're living in a world that's in a period where there's some growth, there's some room for optimism, but as the economists will say, there are many downside risks as well, but also a world in which we are beginning to probably transition to a new set of ideas about what generates growth, where do you invest in order to generate growth, and in particular, how do you distribute, as I said, the benefits. Many of our partner developing countries, as you know, find themselves in difficulties. Brazil, Russia, and other parts of the developing world as well. Okay. We've done very well as a country in the first 6 months of the year, as you know, in working with the business sector, with labor and government, with a clear action plan that many of you would have heard of, presenting a sort of national front to ratings agencies and saying, we still have, notwithstanding our challenges in South Africa, many things going for this economy. We still are the most sophisticated economy on the African continent, and notwithstanding the fact that there are difficulties on the rest of the continent as well, because as you know, for this year, growth is at 1.6% compared to 3% and beyond that we are actually used to. And that South Africa, in that sense, has the prospects of, better prospects of pulling itself up beyond 1% in the next year if we're given an opportunity to actually do so. Well, the ratings agencies are going to come back starting in a few days' time and ask us, well, you told us in March this year that these are the areas that you would be working in, show us the results. And the one appeal I want to make to all of us is we need to move away from an environment where some of us are very active, some of us are very involved, both in labor and the private sector and government, but many of us are passive in this environment. And we can make a contribution towards creating, notwithstanding all of the political noise or other noises that we have and debates, create a positive narrative about our country. Because there is, in fact, as I say, many good things that are going for us. One of them is our focus on investment, even with the limited resources that we have as government. We know that in terms of the NDP, investment in the economy needs to get to 30% of GDP. We stand last year at about 20% of GDP. But this is where people like yourselves come in, so that we can increase 20% to 30%. And it's investment that's ultimately going to drive an investment in the real economy, in infrastructure and similar ventures, which is going to drive growth, which is going to drive job creation, which is going to give younger people hope in this country. And above all, one of the key initiatives that this partnership has given rise to, which you'll hear more about in the coming weeks, is a youth employment / youth engagement program, where it is hoped that with the collaboration of the private sector, hundreds of thousands of young people will be taken off the streets and given a one-year opportunity to get exposure at work. And I'm hoping that at conferences like this, over and above looking at the numbers that you look at and the scenarios that various speakers will be spelling out for you, you will also look at some of the national dynamics and what a well-endowed audience like yourselves, who are key decision makers in your own right, will contribute towards the larger problem of 30% unemployment, 40% unemployment amongst young people, and make a dent in those numbers, but also importantly an impact on young people's lives. Because without a trained and a well-trained young workforce, which is supposed to be our demographic advantage, we won't be able to capitalize on the many advantages that we actually have. So we're moving into an era, ladies and gentlemen, where the kind of economic model, if you like, is one which has to demonstrate, again, as the G20 statement says, that we are inclusive. We cannot continue with an economy where large numbers of people still sit on the periphery. So what does inclusive growth mean? Is something that you might want to engage in, and I want to challenge the Business Day and Financial Mail leadership to start focusing a lot more on getting these new concepts across, elaborating them for ourselves, getting debates around them, and asking what's the relevance of inclusivity, and practically what does inclusivity actually mean for people who are on the periphery of our economy. But secondly, we also require agility and farsightedness, because doing the same thing in a repeated kind of way isn't going to give us the kind of results that we actually need. And so you'll find that many of the areas that we're focusing on in this partnership with business and labor are areas where new prospects for growth seem to appear. So one of them is tourism, where Minister Hanekom is leading a similar process with the business sector. The second, which has huge potential for South Africa, both in terms of investment, in terms of job creation, training, and exports from this country, is agriculture as well. The third is both the infrastructure part and the aquaculture part of the oceans economy. And these all constitute part of government's 9-point plan, where if we, I think, give our collective efforts and commitment to making it work, we can actually have interesting results, say, in the next 2 years or so. The third element is obviously, in order for all of this to work, we require institutions of our country, both constitutional and otherwise, to have the right kind of expertise, the right kind of skills, but also the right kind of credibility and integrity. And that's at the center of many of the debates that we are having in the country at the moment. But institutions do matter. They are the things, both in terms of organizational structure, in terms of people, values, culture, and the kind of contribution that they make. Institutions outlive individuals. Individuals will come and go, I regret to say to all of us, but institutions is what we actually leave behind. And that applies in your sector of work, but it also applies societally and economically as well. So we need to focus a lot more on continuing to build and strengthen our institutions on the one hand, but on the other hand also ensure that they become sustainable over a longer period as well. The third element is partnerships. We've shown in the first part of the year that it is possible for different sectors to work together, notwithstanding the fact that they might have different interests at different points in time. But we can unite around a national purpose and a national interest. And if we don't, then all of us, whichever sector we come from, will lose out at the end of the day. So the next year or so is quite critical, not only just for ratings purposes, but for ourselves as an economy and as a country as well. And ask yourselves for the rest of the day, if you don't mind, what kind of contribution can you actually make to building a solid alliance, if you like, which will create greater confidence in this country, which results in more investment in this country. And certainly, we as government have to do our share, but you as the private sector need to do your share as well in order to contribute to this kind of environment. Often the narrative in South Africa is you guys in government are the only problem, the rest of us are fine. But the rest of us, I'm afraid, are not quite fine. And it is possible for us to create a national platform where all of us become contributors in this environment. Let me end, because otherwise this can become quite lengthy, by saying that the following are some of the areas that we made commitments on, both to you as South Africans, but to international investors and ratings agencies as well. The first is that we will retain and sustain our fiscal credibility. Notwithstanding lower growth, which will put pressure on the revenue side and equally put pressure on the expenditure side of the budget as well, as we prepare for the medium-term budget policy statement, we will attempt to stick to the deficit numbers and the debt numbers that we had outlined in February. Secondly, we need to ensure that we protect services that we offer as part of the South African social wage to South Africans who are not in employment, who find themselves in poverty, and we still have too many people in poverty in South Africa. So something extraordinary still needs to be done to lift people out of poverty. And that means that all of us need to think about the different forms in which we think through investment processes as well, that on the one hand give you the returns that you require, but on the other hand ensures that there's social returns out of this process as well. The third is to continue to build confidence both amongst labor and business partners, because we all know that consumer confidence and confidence more generally is absolutely crucial for investment on the one hand and for increased economic activity on the other hand. And from the government side, we want to do as much as possible to remove areas of policy uncertainty, to increase certainty around the regulatory requirements. And there's some interesting initiatives that will unfold later in the year around, say, Invest South Africa, which is the new one-stop facility for investors in the real economy, where you can visit one place and have as many of the investment issues, whether they be around incentives or tax or other related issues, to be resolved in a helpful way that ensures that we are a more service-orientated government than we might have been up to this point in time. There are those sectors of the economy where we say investment will actually help to ensure that we get growth in those particular sectors, like agriculture, like tourism. Manufacturing still has some interesting prospects as well. I know we're all very excited by the 3.3 number that we saw out of the second quarter, but I think the realists amongst us also know that that's not necessarily sustainable into the future unless we do something spectacularly different in some of the areas of the economy, as we've pointed out. But inclusivity also means, ladies and gentlemen, and this is another project that business and government are working on together, and that is encouraging as many entrepreneurs and small businesses as possible. So that increases the number of people who are economically active, that creates an environment where we have more startups than we normally do within the kind of South African context. But importantly, we start generating a new sense of energy and urgency within the economy rather than being laid back and waiting for government or somebody else to do the things we need to do. But in attempting to get this larger number of entrepreneurs together, we must also be frank that many people who have been traditionally marginalized find it hard to access finance, find it hard to create or enter into an ecosystem that is supportive for them. And collectively, we need to make a lot more efforts, particularly those of you that are, and us, that are advantaged in the South African context and who have a lot to offer in terms of mentoring and other forms of expertise to take us forward in this regard. Because unless we get that inclusivity going, we don't have a common purpose that we develop amongst ourselves as South Africans as well. So if I had to sum up, number one, the global environment is just about positive, but there are a new set of questions that are being confronted. And I think events like Brexit, the migrant and immigration problems that Europe is facing, the geopolitical situation that we find in different parts of the world is raising new sets of questions to which leaders around the world have to find new sets of answers. Secondly, there's a great focus on the risks rather than the opportunities at this point in time. And so the risks are, in a sense, curtailing the investment drive, curtailing trade finance, and as a result, there's a large pool of money that is flushing around the world looking for short-term yields rather than a long-term commitment to one or other economy. Thirdly, we ourselves are not in recession territory. We have interesting, let's call them small green shoots in different parts of the economy. If we nurture those shoots in the right kind of way and create the right kind of ecosystems, we can certainly get back to 2 and 3% growth over the next 2 or 3 years. I'm an optimist by nature, so you're going to hear that optimism from me, but we require your constituency to be a part of that. The fourth, we are saying we as South Africans also need to think differently and do things differently. We need to look at the broader picture whilst we look at the narrower mandate that each of us have in our jobs. And the broader picture requires us to be part of a constructive process of sustaining economic growth, sustaining inclusivity, giving all South Africans in different parts of our geography and nation an opportunity to be part of this economy, but more importantly, beneficiaries of the economy in a direct sense. Otherwise, we will see some of the stuff that you've seen in Europe in terms of negative mobilization, and we had a bit of a taste of that during the elections as well. But all in all, I think that we have more going for us than against us, and it's up to us as South Africans to ensure that we seize the opportunities that we have and create and consolidate the partnerships that we've begun to experiment with earlier this year. There's lots of skeptics, there's lots of naysayers around, there are lots of critics that we actually have, but I'm convinced that unless we work together and put a national interest picture ahead of us, and then worry about our self-interest as a secondary point of reference, we won't be able to seize the opportunities that are available for us, both within South Africa and the continent as well. So I wish you'll join us in this journey that I'm describing, which is not going to be easy, but it can become quite exciting. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much for that. Speaking of seizing the opportunity, I'm going to seize you for just 2 minutes more, and your staff and your team say that that's okay. I'd like to take a couple of questions. I'm sure that some of you have questions. We only have a few minutes. So a quick show of hands, who'd like to ask a question? I can get a microphone to you. There are 2 hands here. And so let's start here, and there's 1 hand over there, so let's start there. But maybe if I can kick things off, Minister.
She's abusing her privileges.
Come and get me. If you were to consider South Africa as, to have a family album of South Africa, there'd be many faces in there, many stories. And I know that your message today is tailored to this particular audience, and there's a lot of work that we need to do. But if you had to speak to a young man or young woman from Unit 13, from where I live, or in Diepkloof, or in Diepsloot, or in Younger, Khayelitsha, anywhere in South Africa, who thinks that's a great message, but I've been unemployed for so long. I even have a degree and I'm unemployed. My mum can't get a home loan. My dad can't get a home loan. We're losing the kind of optimism you say we have to latch onto. Speak directly to them. What would you say to them?
Well, in the first instance, I'm going to say that all is not lost. Secondly, that there's all these influential people with a lot of money that I keep talking to every other day, who, if they change their orientation a bit, can in fact make certain things possible. Thirdly, that we need to move from just ideas to practical impact. And so in each part of this country, people need to feel change. They need to feel that they can reach out to, or they're being reached out to in some kind of way, and that they have a ladder that they could use to actually climb to a better future. And fourthly, that both in the private sector and in government in particular, we are creating institutions that will offer training for them, educational opportunities for them, and prepare them for a different future. But lastly, don't wait for somebody else to do everything. Look for opportunities and seize opportunities yourself as an individual, and create a mindset which creates an enterprising individual rather than a dependent individual.
All right. So we've got some questions over here. Maybe just say who you are and where you're from.
Good morning. My name is Gerard Lampen from Sanlam iTrade.
We'll see whether you're handsome or not.
Do you want to stand up, Gerard?
I'm not handsome. I've got a face for radio.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to start with President Gordhan, but then again, there would be no questions. We focus on other things. Finance Minister, if we look at the ratings agencies again, nothing improved on the economic growth side, nothing improved on the fiscal side, really. The parastatals are still in a mess. So even if we assume that you're still there by the end of the year, do you think there's even a 50% chance that the ratings agencies will not downgrade us?
Yes.
That's the whole answer. Well, were you waiting for more? Okay, go ahead, sir.
No, just okay. I think the answer is still yes, but as I said, on the balance, yes, there are all those difficulties that you've pointed out, but there are also positive things that are working in this country, positive things that are being developed in this country. We need to highlight them. For example, my colleague, Minister Nkwinti, can show you very nice pictures of 3 or 4 what he calls and we call agri-parks that are developing in different parts of the country, which will change the way in which small farmers relate to the market, so to speak. Now, if that becomes a systemic development, thousands of people in the country will benefit from that. Now, you'll be surprised at the kind of disjunctures that we have in our economy, how people are actually sitting on the margin, and we haven't done enough to give them access and include them. So let's talk about, that's why I say, think about this word inclusivity, and what does it mean for different sections of society? Just economically, forget about the rest. And what is it that we could do with the resources that we have, including the resources in this room, to just make them part of the economy? and then let them find their way and create, as some people would call it, the ecosystem that will enable them to thrive in our environment. And we don't have the right ecosystem, whether it's for startups or venture capital initiatives or so on. A little bit more effort over the next few years needs to be put into that. And it's possible to grow at a faster rate, but also more inclusively as well.
Go ahead,
But
sir.
it's going to be a tough sell, I admit that. Hopefully you're going to join us.
Liston Menches from Sasfin Wealth. Mr. Minister, let me start by saying that I have the highest regard for you in your personal capacity, what you're doing for the country, and stepping in when you did. And I think any number of people in the audience here will support me in that statement. But I have a request to you. You've given a plea to us for commitment and partnership and all of those good things, and I think the goodwill has always been here for that. But I'm going to give a plea the other way. I'm going to say, I think that a number of us are very concerned with words that come out called radical economic transformation. It sounds very like the role models of Robert Mugabe and Hugo Chavez. And what I'm saying is, please, can we get a situation where the government is the coach and not the player? I think if we get to that stage where the government is saying, how do I get my man to get the try? How do I get my person across the line? Those are the points that we would like to get from business. And if I can just put the emphasis beyond that, and it goes back, we can have 9 or 10 different items and objectives. But if the words are go for growth, I believe if we have growth, even if we put that ahead of education and unemployment, if we say, will this create growth at every decision we take, and that's all of us and including the government, I think then we will get growth. Thank you.
I certainly agree with your latter sentiment, that if we put our heads together, we'll get growth. If we put our efforts in a collective way behind the right sort of programs, we'll also get growth. So no argument with that, and that's the essence of my appeal this morning. At the same time, let's recognize that if the mainstream of South Africa, which includes yourselves, doesn't become, as I indicated earlier on, agile enough, alive to both the South African changing circumstances and the global changing circumstances, then events will pass us by. And so there are some things that must radically change. For example, 40–50% unemployment amongst people, young people below the age of 24 must radically change. I'm sure we all agree. So the word radical doesn't mean ridiculous. It means bringing about fundamental change in a particular area that actually requires that change. And so, for example, the number of small businesses in which black people in South Africa are involved in. We all know where we come from historically, but we haven't compensated adequately for that history yet. So what kind of leg up, what kind of assistance, what kind of supportive environment are we going to actually create in order for a massive multiplication of micro, small, and medium-sized businesses? Because then everybody has a stake in contributing towards the growth that you speak about. So don't allow ourselves to be misled by what appears to be radical rhetoric. On the one hand, there is radical surgery required. So if one has a particular ailment, your doctor is going to say, you have a choice. You can die, or I do something radical. Take you to the theater and do X, Y, and Z. But there you have a better 60% chance of surviving. You're going to say, let's give it a chance. And let's do the radical surgery that's actually required. We've all grown up politically in different contexts. And we all perceive each other politically and socially through different lenses, even 22 years after democracy. We must confront that. But it's through this kind of dialogue and frank dialogue and exchange of ideas where we develop a bit of trust amongst each other, because we have a common national interest, that will create an environment where we can negotiate the words radical and the kind of perceptions that it actually creates. We don't want some of the situations that you described. We're nowhere near that in South Africa. And that's the good part. The question is, how do we go beyond where we are? in a much more positive direction as well. And I'm sure with your experience and the experience of people here, we can begin to move in that direction.
So just to frame that, I think the headline, radical is good, Minister, is what you're saying.
I've been a radical all my life, so, you know.
We will take a final question from over there, and then we must let the Minister go. But I think you had your hand up right at the very beginning, that lady. So the pair of you are the last. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Gandhi Maholejo. I'm from a company called Recotex. It's a company which I own. So my interest would be small business. I think if you look at the South African landscape, politically and otherwise, prior to the first legitimate elections, we had small businesses in the townships. Those small businesses did not rely on government. Let's bring it a few years to today. There are a lot of other businesses which are doing well and don't rely on government. And I think that is just the strength of the private sector, formally or informally. As the minister, does it worry you that there are so many other black businesses which are successful and don't rely on government or tenders? However, these businesses are not being taken care of. Thank you.
Thanks.
No, that's fantastic. I think the less you depend on government, the better. And the less tender involvement you have, unless you have a valid contribution to make by supplying a particular set of services or goods, the better as well. Because what you are describing is the real entrepreneur in some ways, but there are also real entrepreneurs who provide goods and services to the state as well. So if we can take you and multiply you by 1 million, it'll be fantastic. Just give us the formula.
To you.
My name is Lizette Datner. I'm from the Union of Jewish Women. On Sunday, I was at an informal settlement, and we give out handouts. It's not good enough. We need handouts. And I was wondering if you couldn't implement a program of 6 to 12-month voluntary community service where the youth, the unemployed youth, would have work experience and therefore be able to grow from that.
We have two, and amongst many others, government-sponsored programs, the Expanded Public Works Program, where billions of rands are spent in a year, and hundreds of thousands of young and old people participate on a particular basis. And we also have the Community Works Program, which works on a similar basis as well. But I think the part that doesn't work necessarily too well is the training part. And so whilst you have the work involvement and a stipend that goes with it, the training part doesn't quite come in adequately as well. But those are the sorts of ideas that people like yourselves and others should experiment with. Build trust in a community, build community organizations, and I'm sure people are going to come forward and participate in that. Thank you, and thanks for your efforts.
Minister, thank you very much for your time this morning on behalf of all of the organizers and our guests. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go well.
Thank you very much.
Round of applause for the Minister, please. All right, I'm just going to rely on the podium mic then. I think that should be fine. All right, I hope that you were fed in whatever you came to hear from the minister's point of view. I hope that you got the specific answer that you wanted, the perspective that you wanted. But I think what's striking for me is what he talked about, and I think that word is important, inclusivity. You can't have specific sectors of the economy growing and keeping that wealth together. There has to be more distribution. There has to be more inclusivity. I think the gentleman over there was talking about generating business. And all of you have heard the stories of young, small entrepreneurs who have really just taken the leap and done things for themselves. And that is a growing sector in South Africa, but it certainly does need more support. And the kind of ecosystem that the minister was talking about to make that sustainable and to create volume of small business growth in South Africa. All right, just a couple of housekeeping tips. It might